Hey guys, it's Keeley and I'm back. It's been a hot minute. For a little bit there I started doing K-pop stuff, which I'm still not opposed to on this channel, but I finally decided that I want to make book videos again. I've been reading a little bit more, so here's like a little life update for you. I graduated from college. Yay! I'm so excited. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology with a minor in criminal justice, and I'm very excited. I also got a puppy in January, so that's been fun. I went to New York for the first time ever in March, and in September I'm moving from Texas to Oregon, and I am so excited. Everything's just like coming together and working out, and the reason why I didn't make a lot of book videos is because I hadn't been reading, because senior year was just crazy and hectic and I had a lot going on and classes that were very, very difficult, but your girl made good grades and she graduated, but here I am. So we're going to be talking about all of the books that I've read recently. The last wrap up I did was in August. So we're going to do all the books I read from September till now. So here we go. So there are a total of 10 books that I've read, and I will start with September. In September, I read 0 books. So we're moving right on to October. So the one book I read in October was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I enjoyed this quite a bit because I love criminal justice, serial killer, like psychological things. I mean, psychology and criminal justice were my degrees, so I was really excited to read this just because I do want to go into a focus of serial killers. So Jack the Ripper has always fascinated me. When I lived in London, I went on a Jack the Ripper tour and met the #1 Jack the Ripper expert, so that was really, really cool. So I was really excited to read this one. It did fall a little flat. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, but it follows this girl who's in London, and it's like Victorian era London, and she has this fascination with forensic science, which is really, really strange because she is a woman in Victoria, London, and that is just frowned upon for women. Especially that kind of job is just frowned upon in general, but especially if you're a woman, it's just not a good thing. But she was really, really awesome, and despite it being like a weird thing and people telling her she wasn't able to, she went and worked in a morgue with her uncle, and then suddenly these murders started happening and Jack the Ripper came to be. And she meets Thomas, who is a forensic science student, and he's just wonderful. He is very dark and I guess cynical and kind of has no personality. I would call him a sociopath, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, but I really did enjoy it, and I'm excited to see where the sequel goes because of how this one ended. But like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So in November, I also read 0 books. So moving on to December, I read 2 books. The first book I read in December is one of my all-time favorite books now, and that is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I can't even explain how much this book means to me and how wonderful it was, and the representation of OCD and anxiety in this was just so good. And I know it is own voices because John Green does deal with OCD, so it was just absolutely perfect. But it follows this girl who does have OCD and anxiety, like really, really bad, and this billionaire in her town goes missing. So her and her friend decide to solve the mystery of this billionaire to get the reward. And so it's really interesting because it's not a story about mental illness, but yet it is, if that makes sense. Like, there's a whole other storyline to it. I will say that the OCD in here is very triggering. I do have obsessive compulsive personality disorder, so it's not as severe as OCD, but the things that she obsessed over and like her compulsions, I found myself doing as I was reading this book. So that was a little triggering, and at times like I had to put it down because like my thoughts would just start spiraling like hers do, but I still really, really enjoyed it. I loved the characters, and I love John Green's novels. I love how he writes his characters and his writing style, and it's just wonderful and perfect. And if you haven't read this, please do. I think it's very, very important, and it is very, very good, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And the second book I read in December was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys, and This one was amazing. I love historical fiction, especially like World War II era historical fiction. Now, although this was World War II era, it didn't focus on the Hitler and Jew concentration camp. It focused on the other side that is less talked about, which is Stalin and those concentration camps and those prisoners that were taken. So this story follows a girl named Lena, who her and her mother are taken to a concentration camp by the Soviet police, and it just follows her story as they're in these camps and they're just treated like absolute trash. And it was just so hard-hitting, and it really opened my eyes because, like I said, a lot of us know and read a lot about Hitler and that side of things, but I didn't know that Joseph Stalin was equally as bad as Hitler, if not more so. He did have more victims over a longer period of time, and I just didn't know that. That's not something that a lot of people talk about, even in history classes, so I'm really glad that this was touched upon, because I think those people's lives are just as important as the people in the Holocaust. They all went through very similar, if not the same things, so I think this is a very important read, and it does like teach you a lot about what happened and what those people went through. And it was just very heart-wrenching and just breaking, and like I cried so many times just because of what Lena and the other people went through, and the ending was just heart-wrenching too, but it was just unfathomable what these people survived, and I know that I wouldn't survive a day in the life they lived, so I just have mad respect for them. But I definitely love this book, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The first book I read in March was Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Graudin, and like I said, I love historical fiction, and this book is historical fiction, but it's also like alternate reality historical fiction. So this takes place as if the Axis powers won World War II. So Hitler won the war, they're still alive, the Nazis are still in control over Jews and the other minorities that they just didn't like or care for. In this world, it follows this girl who escapes a concentration camp, and she has this ability that helps her go into this motorcycle race, because in this world there's a motorcycle race to show the victories of the Nazis, and they go through like all the countries they conquered, and the winner of the motorcycle race gets to meet Hitler. So the girl who enters the motorcycle race is in it to win so she can kill Hitler. That just sounds so incredible, and it was so incredible. I love the characters. I love the different twists on reality that they had, even though I wouldn't want that at all. But the main character, if that had happened, I would want someone like her and the Resistance fighting for us, because they were just awesome and great people and lovely and wonderful. And it just really opened your eyes that I'm really glad that he didn't win, and he was just a terrible person, and she's awesome because she wanted to go and kill him. And it was fascinating. The motorcycle race is the majority of this, because like I said, they go over, like, not hundreds, they go over a lot of countries and thousands of miles, so it is like do or die in this motorcycle race. There's sabotage, there's murder, all that stuff, and it's just fascinating. And I loved Luca. Luca Lowe is my child, and I love him so much. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This next book I read in March was a reread for me, and that is Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. If you haven't heard of this, you might be new here. Everyone on BookTube loves this series, including myself, and this is just a epic sci-fi series about this colony that is under attack from this company, so they have to flee their planet, and just a lot of madness breaks out. Particularly in this one, a like disease breaks out that makes people murderous, and that's all I'm gonna say, because you have to read it. And if you haven't seen, it's told in like a super cool format, and I really like it. I love Katie and Ezra very much. I've talked about this before, so I'm not gonna go into much detail, but I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. Once again, it was just as good as the first time. In April, I actually read 3 books. The first book I actually read in April I don't have with me because my mom is currently rereading it, and it was actually a reread for me, and that is Gemina by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, which is the sequel to Illuminae. I was rereading the first 2 so I could read Obsidio and get the full effect, and it was a great idea. I love Gemina. There's this huge plot twist in Gemina that, although I had already read the book, I still didn't see it coming, and I literally gasped out loud when I read it, and I was like, how do I not remember that? I don't know, but Gemina was just as good as Illuminae. I love Hannah and Nick so much, and Nick's cousin, who is Ella. Ella. I love Ella too. I love the characters in that book, and the storyline is just so cool. And right at the end, you get to see how the stories kind of connect, because the first book and the second book do follow different characters, but the storylines end up connecting in the end, which is really cool. And of course, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars once again. And you guessed it, the next book I read was Obsidio by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the third and final book in the Illuminae Files trilogy, and it did not disappoint. Let me tell you, this was so good. I really loved how we got to see even more of Nick's sense of humor, because he's so funny, and I love that we got to see all of our characters, all of our favorite characters, interact with each other, and they're just so powerful and awesome and amazing. And my heart dropped a few times in this book, and it was so good. It's hard to describe because it is the third book, but basically all the storylines combine into one, and everything just makes sense, and there's a lot of plot twists where you're just like, that actually makes so much sense. I really liked it. I think out of all of the couples, Katie and Ezra are my favorite. That was one of those things where I was like, I don't know who my favorite is, because I had read the first 2 books separate, but when I read all of the 3 books, like marathon them back to back, I decided Katie and Ezra might be my favorite just by a little bit. But anyway, I gave Obsidio 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. This series is so good. Read it. And the last book I read in April was Blood for Blood by Ryan Grodin, and this is the sequel to Wolf by Wolf, so I can't explain much because I cannot spoil you what happened in the first one, but this is the sequel, so it follows the first one. And that's all I can say. I really enjoyed it, except for the ending. We're not going to talk about what happened in the end. Just ignore that and pretend it didn't happen. But I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars, despite not being happy with how it ended. It's fine. Everything's fine. And finally, in May, I read 2 books. The first book I read, or listened to, that's right, I listened to an audiobook for the first time in my life. Now, I had never wanted to listen to an audiobook just because they don't work for me. I completely respect them and understand what they do for other people, especially people who can't physically read. Like, they're awesome, but for me personally, I've never been interested in them just because I know I would not be able to focus or really visualize what's going on in the story. So I decided that I wanted to listen to a book that I have already read countless times and can basically recite myself, and of course that is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, and this was narrated by Jim Dale. And I actually really enjoyed it. I listened to it a lot while I was running and while I was driving to and from college, because my home is 4 hours away from where my college was. So I listened to it a lot and I really liked it. I had a little bit of a problem with the way he pronounced some words. I don't really like that. Like I said, sometimes I would get kind of everywhere unfocused on the story, so I'm glad it was something that I had already loved and read. But I ended up enjoying it, and I do want to listen to all the other Harry Potter books on audio, but audiobooks are so expensive, and your girl just graduated college and is poor. So I can't, unless you have any ideas on how to listen to those, because I really want to, because I love Harry Potter and I want to get it any way I can. But obviously gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book I had to talk about here is Geekerella by Ashley Poston. I absolutely love this book. I related to it so much and it just hit me so hard. So obviously this is a Cinderella retelling, and it follows this girl named Elle who lives with her evil stepmother and evil stepsisters. And she's just hated by them. They disrespect her so much. The one thing she has to hold on to is Starfield, which is this fandom, this movie franchise that she just loved so much and spent so much time with her dad on it, and they just bonded over it so completely. So it's kind of like my Harry Potter, and she just holds on to this so much, and her dad ends up passing away. But before he did, he started this ExcelsiCon, which is a convention for Starfield and other fandoms, and it just sounds like the best place ever, and I really want to go, but alas, it is fictional. But anyway, so she holds on to Starfield, and one day, Starfield is getting a remake. Dun dun dun. Like, can you imagine your favorite series is getting a remake? So she's waiting for who they're gonna cast, and the person they cast, she can't stand. That would just break my heart. So she just writes this blog post on Starfield about the casting and how she doesn't like that kid. He's this heartthrob that all the teenage girls are just gonna watch Starfield because of him, and it's just awful. One day she gets this text message and they start texting about Starfield because they find out they're very much both in love with Starfield, and neither one of them have no idea who the other person is, but they have this conversation. It's kind of like when you meet an online Twitter friend and you like obsess over something together, but yet like you have no idea who the other person is. It was like that. One day ExcelsiCon is coming up and she wants to win the costume contest so she could go to the Starfield premiere. She also wants to meet this guy so she could give him a piece of her mind and be like, look, don't mess this story up because it's important to a lot of people. So basically, you can imagine what happens. It's great, it's wonderful, and the way she feels about Starfield is the way I feel about Harry Potter. So I just related her so much, and I'm actually going to a Harry Potter convention in August, so I was just like, what if this happens? I would be the happiest girl in the world. But it was great. I loved it. Definitely read it. And I heard there's going to be a companion following some other characters in this, and I think I have an idea of who it might follow. We'll see. I'm excited. I just really loved it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So, those are all the books I've read in the last however many months. It's been a busy few months, and I'm just glad that I have read 10 books in that amount of time. It's not a lot in those many months, but it's a lot for me. I've accomplished a lot. How are you doing? I haven't talked to anyone in such a long time. Wow. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.